It's Wednesday night on Dress from Conroy's Emporium, where you can get anything your heart desires. Have you washed your hands, Conroy? Very tasty. My name is Jeremy Taylor, and welcome to the talk show that pretends to care, and where we ask our customers to join our team. And we're going to have a little competition as we start, because the team have got upset with me. They think I say too much, and my special words so unequivocally, unconsentaneously, undulating, unecornic, unisonously. I ask you, unfunnily, Lewis.
Unwise.
Off with your uns. Away with your uns.
With all of them?
Or some.
No.
I want to see.
No, just one at a time.
Just one.
One at a time. Okay.
Go on.
What's
Unabashed.
Unavailable.
Unbearable, unintentionally unfunny. How about that? That's 2 ones in a row.
Unabout that, yes.
Unmanly?
Donna?
Unequal.
Unfailing.
The...
No, unfailing.
Did I say unbearable already?
And then...
Uncouth.
And then he...
Unspeakably bad.
And if you're listening to this, you know, it's not quite as easy as it looks to come up with something beginning with undulating.
Actually, it's very easy.
Onion.
You just read it.
Onion. There's another word. Onion.
It has an un at the beginning and an un at the end.
Uncool.
Okay, words beginning with un that don't actually have un in them.
A what?
Words beginning with un that do not start with un.
Only
As
one
in-
that I can think of.
What's that?
Only.
Only
Yeah, I can't think of any of that. Don't start with you.
Besides onion.
Onion.
Encore.
Encore is good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Except that I don't pronounce that encore.
How do you
I pronounce it encore.
Yeah, that's it. Encore.
Snooties.
How is that different?
Oh, wow. You're stretching. We are stretching.
Unfortunately, it's time to start.
Let's have a look. Compensation for war crimes is very much in the news. Reparations, if you like. We Brits are still pissed at the Romans and Julius Caesar. Not to mention the Vikings that said the Native Americans may have a similar claim against the Vikings. There is a serious aspect to this, as soldiers acting on their government orders are being indicted all over the world. Examples in the US and in the UK. If you take Northern Ireland, for example, a 66-year-old former Lance Corporal in Northern Ireland in 1972 is up in front of the judge having to explain his actions of all those years ago. He was 23 and he was being fired at, and they're trying to say that he should be responsible for this, along with 250 other soldiers that may yet be interviewed if they can find them. Many of those are in different countries. So I'm interested in what the team thinks is, does someone who is acting on his government's instructions, perhaps as a police officer or a protection officer or a soldier, is he actually responsible, liable, 25, 30, 40 years later?
This kind of goes into the conversation that we were having last week about just kind of the nature of the military, some of the things that Eva was talking about. It's very difficult to say definitively. For me, it's very difficult to say definitively that a soldier is responsible for following orders. I would think that it is more the case that the soldier is responsible for not following an immoral or an unjust order. But I know that leads to all kinds of havoc within the military ranking, and there's a whole other shitstorm that gets opened up if soldiers start willy-nilly thinking for themselves. So,
if this were an easy topic, it wouldn't have merited discussion throughout the ages. It always has.
Yeah, that's not an easy topic. When does the moral imperative kick in and replace the military law? You're supposed to follow orders. It's kind of a little bit like looking for responsibility from the pawn in a game of chess, and shifting the responsibility to the pawn from the actual player of the game of chess. As a soldier, you're a pawn. Now, there are other situations where actually, during the Second World War and World War I, certain figures in the war took initiative to commit unspeakable crimes against humanity. And that's, I think, when they actually become responsible. The overall directive of the National Socialist Party and Hitler was an imperative, but there were characters within this game, within this war, that actually took initiative, like Dr. Mendele, like Himmler, people that actually took it into their own hands and actually elevated the level of
but what about guards at...
and Mengele was operating under Nazi orders. They wanted to find out all those experiments, as gruesome and as hideous as they were, did in some warped way serve the Nazi purpose to experiment the freezing, for example. Could soldiers survive? At what temperature could soldiers survive or be revived?
Airmen. Mainly, it was airmen who crashed into the sea.
It doesn't change the fact of how abhorrent those were, but he was not acting on his own initiative. He was following orders.
Overall, but within those orders, he took initiative in extremely perverse experiments and extreme acts of terror and crimes against humanity. So, I don't know. I think the soldiers themselves, the soldiers that are going on the front line and fighting for their government, I don't think they carry the responsibility. I don't know. What do you think, Jeremy?
Well, I wonder, because I look at, say, the Falklands in 1982. Bunch of soldiers, British soldiers, Marines, are told that they are to take a particular hill. They go up the hill. The hill is being defended by conscripted young Argentines, aged 17, 18, 23, that sort of age group. They're in slit trenches. They've been there for months. They're wet, cold. They're covered with tarpaulins, right? And our guys go up the hill, and they've only got so many clips with them. They've been walking right across the Falklands for days. They know they've got to keep fighting. They only have so many bullets, but they have bayonets. These kids had stopped firing, hadn't fired for hours. They're cowering in wet slit trenches, and our guys bayoneted them. Is that a war crime? And if it is a war crime, do the parents of those kids reserve the right to sue the British government?
Wow.
You're treating war like a game here.
Well,
how do you mean?
Don't.
I actually...
If so-and-so breaks this rule, do the parent get the right to demand money? That's treating it like a game.
Yes, and besides, the subject is never ending. If we were to talk about reparations, which almost always boil down to money, then you could practically pick a country on the face of the earth right now, and someone has done something to someone else, and someone else is demanding retribution for that.
And it becomes a never-ending vendetta.
In the form of usually of cash. But you're right, it becomes a never-ending vendetta. And oftentimes it, as you said earlier, it's not just 10, 20, 30, 40 years. It could be hundreds of years after the fact. And, vengeance never ends.
And it never leads to anything good. And
so what about slaves then?
I'm sorry, I didn't even agree with Jewish reparations, Germany to Israel. I just do not agree with reparations because money does not bring back your loved one.
It needs to more violence.
Money does not stop the violence. It doesn't cure anything. It doesn't change anything. You just put more money in someone's pocket. That's all.
It's well established that World War II started because of the reparations for World War I.
They were way too harsh. But let's bring it to the present. ISIS committing atrocities individually. They're using little kids to commit atrocities. Are those kids liable? What happens when we do catch them?
Well, I would think that using little kids in the example adds another layer of complexity to an already complex issue.
And it wouldn't be the first time that people have used little kids, the child soldiers, Germany at the end of the war, conscripted children, literal children.
And when do you change from being a young person who is told to do something and has to do it to being old enough to make up your own mind? And if you've had this all your life, when do you ever get that knowledge anyway?
Well, but that's kind of what the court system is set up to decide, and I don't know if there's been a ruling from the International World Court on when a person reaches the level of maturity that they can actually be held accountable for their decisions. But at least here, I mean, we have an age of consent and a general age that's recognized as your mature age.
It's 18.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and
most of the world it is.
Uh-huh. But still,
if
we've
the
not
reparations is a political thing, as it is, for example, in Northern Ireland, and a soldier, a para, who was 23 at the time, is now 66, something like that. He's being dragged in front of a court. People will take photographs. They take photographs, they know who he is, and the Irish will go and find his family, right? Now, he was serving, this was third tour. Okay, so he'd been in Northern Ireland twice before, and as far as the Northern Irish militants are concerned, he's fair game, and so is his family. Now, does he not have a right to be looked after by his government, just like American soldiers have a right to be protected? I have a friend who has a son who's actually currently at home on leave. He's operating in Afghanistan. And they don't want anything about their son on Facebook in case the bad guys find out where he lives and have a go at the family.
Yeah, but that's really conflating two different issues.
But it's about, in Northern Ireland, reparations. Because on Bloody Sunday, people got killed because the IRA, or whoever it was, the provost, opened fire on British troops, so they returned fire.
Yeah, but that's still not a reparation. Killing somebody or going after their family.
What they're trying to do is to get money from the British government.
Right.
So they're dragging these people into court to get money.
That's interesting.
And that leaves them open for retaliation.
It's such a bizarre topic that you
Weird.
picked, Jeremy. It's very interesting. And it's going to get only more complex with the advancement of technology. I mean, do you now, as we speak, do you look for reparation from some 19-year-old kid parked in a trailer in Nebraska pushing a joystick and killing hundreds of people with a drone?
Good point, yeah.
We are looking at robotic soldiers that are already reality, right? I mean, we're going to have robots fighting our wars. It's already
you can't put
a reality.
A robot on
so,
trial.
So it's very interesting where this whole topic is going to go in the future or in the immediate future.
Yeah.
It's an interesting topic.
I don't think so. I just don't think it's going to happen. I don't think that we're going to see the kind of reparations that we're talking about. If reparations is even the right word, it's definitely the right word when you're talking about Nazi Germany because they lost. But when you're talking about a world power that
will not lose,
that hasn't lost, like the U.S., should the U.S. pay? And again, reparations is not the right word. People have asked for an apology from the U.S. government for dropping the bombs in Japan. They haven't asked for money. They haven't asked for anything other than an apology.
And we still wouldn't do that.
We still won't do that because we were at war. What is the...
Yeah.
We'll finish up and move on to another subject. I just want to point out that everybody knows that Italy's got no money. So it's a waste of time, the Brits going against the Romans for what they did when they came. On the other hand, the Vikings... Now, Norway and Denmark and Sweden, they've got Volvo. They've got loads of money.
So the UK is going to go after...
So I think we should be going after the Norwegians.
And we should all go after Mongolia.
I don't know.
Because of Genghis Khan. He killed, 50 million people?
Yeah.
Kate Brown, changing the subject. Kate Brown is a Democrat. She's a governor or a governess.
Sure.
I think
I'll go along with that, sure.
She's a governess. And she has a little problem.
No, just governor.
She has a little problem, does our Kate, and that is that she has a responsibility for a small building in the middle of nowhere, in a bird reservation, in fact, that has been taken over by a bunch of guys who think that the federal government should not be doing what they do.
Right.
And so,
that
slightly
boils down,
tongue-in-cheek, I'm asking the question tonight on Conroy's Emporium's Undressed is, what is a Texas governor to do? What's a Oregon governor to do? you might be damned if you do or damned if you don't. But what we do know is...
And actually, the governor is going to have very little to do with
federal.
this because it's a federal matter.
Issue. Yeah, it's
Right.
a federal issue.
And this
isn't she
particular
happy
matter
about that?
is actually rapidly hitting low comedy. In other words, people are just laughing at the people there who forgot to bring their Twinkies with them, apparently.
Yeah, and a more interesting question is, if those 20 people or whatever, how many people they are, if they were Muslims,
Or Bulgarians.
and they took
I don't
and
like
they
this
got
question.
armed to the teeth, and they took over a federal building.
I don't like this question.
What
Yeah,
would be
we're-
the reaction? No, we would be dead. They would be dead.
Hang on. A lot of
necessarily.
people have brought up that same example. If they were Muslim, if they were black, and
Come on,
in
seriously,
criticism,
if they were black.
absolutely,
Dead.
they're in it. Boom.
Yeah.
And it's been brought up as criticism because the federal government is holding back. They are not
They are,
reacting.
yeah.
Yes, they are not reacting. They are hoping that it will fizzle out on its own. And the federal government has reason to hope that it fizzles out. They don't want
this
another
is
Waco
quite honestly
or
the
Ruby
reason that
Ridge.
exactly what you said is the reason that I don't like this line of thinking. People are consistently comparing what some local cops that have been poorly trained and
Exactly,
ill-equipped
yes.
to deal with the situations that are as complex as the race issue, compounded with the crime issue, compounded with the historical,
issue.
all of these different things that are coming to boil in these racial situations with the cops, with this situation that by everybody's definition is a federal definition. We're literally talking about the cream of the cream as far as legal enforcement. And these people really have a better grip on what they are doing and how to handle the situation than Officer Todd, who
Yes.
has, his only dealings with black people is to arrest
Absolutely.
them.
But if you take it away from talking about how it's being handled by whichever authorities are in charge on whatever incident, what about the public perception? The public perception of these guys is not outraged, oddly enough.
No, I disagree with you. There is a lot of chatter on social media that why don't they just go in there and blow those fuckers up?
Oh, I don't
And
know
there's
about
signs
that.
on the street. What I'm asking, in some ways, if you look at this mystic histories of believing of what happened 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 200 years ago, are replaced by actuality. Actuality
lost me
being... Well, there's some long words there, Lewis, but the actuality
Stay with it,
being
Lewis.
is that these farmers who've occupied the place are taking hundreds of thousands of dollars in federal, shall I use that word again? Federal subsidies to do their various businesses. 50, 100 years ago, the land that they were saying, well, we used to put our cattle on. No, they didn't. There wasn't any water. They had a lake. The only way people earned money over the last 56 years, the major income earner in that part of the world was lawyers suing on behalf of neighbors each other because people were using other people's water. So when you actually go and look at what I call the actuality of the history of the place, they haven't been cattle barons for 200 years. They just like to think they have.
And what's more, when they do pay the federal government for grazing rights, it's 93% cheaper to graze on federal land than it is on privately owned land. They're getting a huge discount because it's held down artificially.
Yeah, but I don't think any of this goes to the meat of what we were talking about, and that is whether or not these guys are being handled properly by the federal government.
Well, I was listening
they are.
I do believe they are, yeah. And I was listening to NPR, and that very subject came up of, what if this were Ferguson?
Mm-hmm.
And the commentator said, you're comparing apples with oranges. There is no comparison.
There really is. I mean, the difference is you have this group of what are they being called online? Yall Qaeda.
Yall Qaeda.
And
Yall Qaeda.
these
But
guys
now-
have basically decided to go and pick a fight with this unstoppable, unmovable.
They're not threatening to kill each other or kill any hostages.
not.
They're just
Yeah,
sitting there
they have
hoping
tremendous-
to be
Which
shot
makes
at.
me laugh because in the surrounding areas, they've canceled school out of fear of harm coming to the children.
Oh,
and I'm
right.
like, come on, it's a bunch of white dudes sitting in a room just doing nothing.
Eating Twinkies.
I'm not going to go that far.
And that, with respect, is a bit of the problem. Is because if a sheriff's officer does do something, he does something silly, and these guys decide to open up, they have weapons there, hunting rifles, where the bullet will literally go through one building and it'll come out the other side and it will kill people. And so they have to close the schools. Because if suddenly a firefight broke out at a moment's notice...
For a firefight to break out, there would
collateral
have
damage.
to be an extensive federal presence, just like Waco broke out and Ruby Ridge broke out. You had to have the extensive federal presence there to create the combustible situation that caused that. And they're just not there in those numbers. They're just holding back, waiting
I
for this.
think
Hey,
the
the guys
general-
in there might disagree over a football game and start shooting at each other. You
There's
never
something-
know.
There's something perversely satisfying in watching these guys being completely ignored by
Ignored.
the government.
I love it. Yes,
It's
ignored.
probably the sweetest thing.
I want to
It's got to break up by the
Did you
Super
see
Bowl.
Did you see the article? It's an op-ed piece in the Lawrence Journal World
Leonard
Pitts.
about something, and I forget what the title was, but it's one of our favorite columnists.
Is this the Leonard Pitts
Yeah.
article?
Leonard Pitts.
Oh,
yes,
Leonard
where
Pitts.
he's like, where they're sitting there talking, going, was there a lot of news coverage down there when you came up? No. No photographers? No, no.
What do we got to do? Get
Yeah.
bikini-clad ladies
That's
in here?
probably
Yeah.
that's probably the most devastating thing for these guys because all they wanted was attention and to be in the center of attention, and they're being just mercilessly ignored. It's so
Yes.
it's wonderful.
They need to cut off all the
we need to
electricity.
go back to the great words of the Cheech and the Chong
Yes.
as to how to deal with this. President,
man, yeah.
the president should, when they walk in and they brief the president will say, "Hey, why don't they just go down and whack their peepees?" So, capital punishment is
Wet
our
Their
next
Peepees is
subject.
a great name for a rock band.
I don't remember
Capital
that one.
punishment is the next subject, and when I say capital, I don't mean capital, I mean capital. Capital. Note the spelling. I'm asking the panel to define their version of capital punishment.
It's
For
just
example,
Brownback.
For example, Brownback. Why complain when you don't bother to vote? If Trump gets the White House, whose fault is it? So, so many have so little, and yet
I'm sorry, you're
so
using
few have
capital-
so much.
Capital punishment
As the
in-
capital.
as
As the building.
As
The
Are you going
building.
to punish?
but you're using it as people in authority are punishing us for
Yes.
not
No,
being
no,
good
no, no.
citizens. Is
We
that
are
how you're
punishing
using
ourselves.
We're
Yes,
punishing
you
ourselves.
see.
By
and
not
what,
voting.
And what can we
Hey, I
do
voted.
about it?
We
Yeah.
could,
What-
as they say, we could punish Washington by sending Brown back there.
To quote, is it Bernie Sanders? I never know these politicians you have, you Americans.
Then what
He
good
says,
are you?
so many
Yeah.
have so little, while so few have so much. What can we do to increase the voting? My question is, what can we do to increase the voting? In Australia, for example, voting is compulsory. You have to
Yes.
vote.
Yeah.
And in many other countries, you are obliged to vote. If you don't vote, you get fined.
Make
can
it a
we
national
do?
holiday.
Yeah, national holiday is one of them.
Yeah.
Do,
There are
don't
some
do
others.
it during a weekday.
Don't do it at a weekday, you think?
Right.
Move it into the
either
19th
holiday or-
century
yeah.
and not have it make it digital.
Make it digital.
Vote from home, in other words?
Vote from home, vote from your phone. They
Vote
can do it
early
for
and
American
often.
Idol. They can
I
do
don't
it.
know. I do not trust the election systems.
You trust
Nothing-
them now?
No,
Oh my God.
I don't trust them now.
Those
and
machines
making
are
them all
falling apart.
digital would make them even more reliable.
Oh,
Hacking.
yeah.
I don't think they can be less reliable. That's kind of my problem.
I kind of liked the voting in England, where you
It's
vote on far
manual,
fewer
yeah.
things, and you put an X in the box, and people sit there and count each vote in front of other people.
That's
You know, if that would work, provided some of the other things that we're talking about, like either making it a holiday, making it a multi-day affair, making it so that there are more opportunities for people to vote, making it so that corporations don't get a bigger vote than a person.
Yeah.
I think all those things would have to happen for people to really not be so apathetic to the whole process.
Provide beer at the election stations.
Oh my God! No, that you're talking about
what a
traditional
I think
graft.
that's a fantastic idea.
No, that was traditional graft. If you voted, at Tammany Hall, you got your liquor.
We've done
and
that in
your
Europe for
cigarettes.
years, haven't we, Eva?
It was done by a politician. What if it's done by the electoral board? Come down, grab a pint,
Have a
make your vote.
sandwich.
And while you're drunk, we'll tell you how to vote.
You know what was ironic about this whole thing is during communism, it was mandatory. We had to vote, which was hilarious because there was just one person you can vote for. So it was absolutely ridiculous. They just wanted to say we had 100% of the population voting, and it was for our
Which
great
nobody
leader.
believed anyway.
At the same time, what was even more funny was that, in our East European culture, drinking is pretty much part of the culture. Alcohol and drinking on Sunday. Are you kidding me? It's almost mandatory. There's no day in the year where drinking is except on election day. Alcohol was not sold in the stores. That was the only day. So what's the point? I mean, who are you going to vote for if you're drunk? It's just still the same person. So it was pretty hilarious.
Of course, you are forgetting that once upon a time, the U.S. was considered the drunkest country in the world, bar none.
Darn it.
Which is, of course.
I don't
Oh,
know
no.
about that.
Europeans would talk about it constantly. That it is one of the things that eventually led to the complete opposite
whole temperance
reaction,
movement.
which is the temperance movement, and hence
And
prohibition.
now we're number one again
But
since
we
I moved
were
in.
just unbelievably
Make up
drunk.
for 100,000 all by
that
yourself.
was used against us in such things like voting. Have some
But
more
in
liquor.
all seriousness, how do we get people when you think that it's only 60%, give or take, depending on which election, 2010, 12.
Try 15% local.
That in national vote, is it about creating a national holiday? Is it about the hours? Is it about 2 days? Maybe having 2 days. Is it about enabling people to get there? How are we going to stop people saying gerrymandering, for example? You can't.
That would require
Gerrymandering
some serious law changes to prevent gerrymandering.
right.
Unfortunately, it is really going to require all of them. It's going to basically it requires us to make the populace not feel so disconnected from the process.
Yeah.
And right now, the reason that we're looking at 15% or 20% or even 40%, 40% would be great. And the reason that we're seeing such low numbers is because there's not very many people that feel like their vote actually counts.
Is the origin of gerrymandering, the origin of the word go to mobilizing the people that watch the Jerry Springer show? Is that what it is?
so
No,
wondering where that
it
was gonna
goes
go.
much further back and is
Jerry's
based on-
dad. Was it Jerry's dad?
No, but it is the name of
Jerry's
a person
granddad.
who first
Yeah.
decided to redraw district lines.
So they can manipulate the outcomes of the election.
And this brings us on
Proud
to our
U.S. tradition.
This brings us on to our last subject. Is America a country of bullies? I find as a Brit coming.
Shut up.
Is it? Does America?
No, I mean
have
it.
too
Stop
many
now.
bullies? Strong survivor vs weak and needy. All these shows. Why are films and shows like Walking Dead, Hunger Games, Survival After the Apocalypse stuff? Why are they so popular? What is it about people who think they've got to be so hoorah?
So macho?
Yeah, so macho.
Oh, well,
And-
bully
and-
and macho.
Yeah.
So
Do you
yeah,
think that's-
Hoorah.
I'm not sure that the two things that it seems like we're talking about two separate things
Yeah,
when we're
yeah.
talking about. It seems like we're talking about bullies, and then we're also talking about this.
The American belief in its own superiority.
Well, no, I think that's part of the bullying, but I think that
So we are talking about bullies then.
I think a-hole
We're
is
talking
what
about
you
two
mean.
things. Yeah,
I think you mean
a-hole is a much better
American
yeah,
a-hole.
Yeah, the American asshole. That's an institution
Is
all
that a
by
new
itself.
show?
Ugly American.
Yeah.
Called Washington.
Yeah, it's a very good. And you know what, Jeremy? I have thought about this many, many times in the past as I immigrated to the United States, and I
And
noticed.
got your citizenship.
Well, yeah, but I noticed certain differences in mentality between everybody else that I know from Europe or Africa or Asia or wherever, and the American psyche. And I might be reaching, but I looked way back into the DNA, the very DNA of the American mentality. And I think who makes up the society, the American society? I mean, who leaves everything behind and starts from scratch? I mean, these are either extremely desperate people. They're on the two extremes. They're either very, very capable and very talented, or they're criminals and very desperate. And so I think this is
there's a third group.
Yeah,
well, yeah.
You know, poor and desperate.
Yes.
No, I'm talking about those of us that
Yeah,
had
they,
no
they were
choice.
they were forced.
No choice
They were
of being here,
forced
yeah.
to come here,
What
of
groups
course.
are- were
But
people forced to come to America?
There's a small group, yeah.
But my point is, my
But you're not
point
glad
is
you're here
that
now?
Were they war
Well,
brides?
most of the time.
my point is that the country, the makeup of the country it's an amalgamation of extremes, and this kind of creates a very, very bizarre mentality. And we have in the DNA the descendants of people that were here and were starting from scratch and were trying to survive and would do anything to survive. Why is American football so popular? I mean,
Because it's about beating the shit out of everybody,
It
isn't
is
it?
about this. It is about this. It's also about acquiring territory. If you look at
There is
the
that.
at the nature of the game, it's just about getting more space forward. Never look back. If you get caught in the back, you lose territory. The idea, get to the end line at all cost. Acquire territory. That kind of is what the United States is. Well, the history of this country is just fight for everything with everything you got. If you have to go through somebody, give him a concussion or break their spine, you just go for it. And I think, in a way, the mentality, the historic aspect of this country is ingrained in the mentality of the American a-hole. Not everybody is an a-hole, but a lot of people are this kind of person, and they're very different from most of the people in the rest of the world.
Can I interrupt for just a second?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that that those are all good and valid points, but everything that you just said can be applied to any great society that has existed in the past.
Yep.
Everything from the concept of the expansion to the concept of going forward at all costs. That can be applied to ancient Rome. It can be applied to Jeremy's old country when they were great. It can be applied to just about
Shit.
True, but this country is young.
It's young. That's the important
and
thing.
it's just a few generations
people-
removed from this. Yeah.
I was going to say, people talk about this topic all the time. Social historians talk about this.
Yeah.
And one of the theories that they put forth is that America has never really lost.
Yeah.
It does not understand the concept of great suffering brought on by war, which
Yeah.
Europe more than understands.
Yes.
And has tried to rise above in its more recent
I-
history.
Are we all
agree.
accepting Russia from
I agree
this? I
with-
mean, think of Putin.
I agree, though.
I'm not
with-
sure where
But
you're
I
going.
think
I think it goes back to
Ultimate bully.
the two notions of A, great society, and B, young. Like everything that we're talking about is symptomatic of a society that has nothing else to do but expand.
But Donna is
But
very right.
I love what
Yeah,
Donna says
I
because,
agree, yeah.
because my aged mother, one of the last sensible things she said to me when I moved to America.
Is this about the
Was-
Chinese again?
No,
It was good riddance.
Was we were talking about 9/11, and I had to give a talk about how the Brits felt about 9/11, what happened on 9/11, and I thought, I'll ask my mother. She lived through the Second World War, the bombing and everything
Yeah.
else. I said, what do you think? What should I say? From a Brit's point of view, she said, very simply, tell them now they know how we felt.
Yes.
And that is coming from someone who was a teenager and working on aircraft. That's what she thought. It was the first thing that came to her head.
Yeah.
Is now they know, because Hawaii, Honolulu,
And we still don't know. We still don't
I was
know.
going to say,
Honolulu-
we still don't know because that was one incident in one city.
right.
And
It
we
was
lost
not
our
watching.
damn minds when it happened.
We did lose our damn minds, and it was not like watching your entire country be destroyed day by
It's very
day by day.
It's very interesting as a historian, or interest that I have as a historian is, if you ask your average American, if you go into Conroy's Bar now and say, well, when was the first time America was actually attacked? And they'll go, well, 9/11. Wrong.
Well-
The Japanese successfully shelled the west coast of America. They dropped bombs on it, but it was all quietened down, and it never got released.
Yeah.
But they did, and
I don't believe
firebombs
you.
and stuff like
We're
that.
great.
Well,
That couldn't happen to us.
And last,
Actually, they also found German subs off the coast of New Jersey.
You're lying.
the last devastating attack.
La.
Last extremely devastating attack was from Canada. You guys don't know this, but Justin Bieber, he's Canadian. You guys.
Now, an older generation considers Celine Dion to be that attack.
Yeah, but Donna is right. 20 million Russians died in World War II. 20 million. The country was dead. They had no man left. It was just.
But
just
they
a complete
still revere bullies.
Yeah, and Stalin
So
still managed to kill
that
another
doesn't-
30 million.
Again,
But
I think it is that notion of greatness. Once your country reaches that pinnacle where that country can determine the fate of the world, that does something to the.
No, I really think it's altogether something entirely different.
I'll bring
I
something-
think it's lack of education.
that might be, but I'll bring something up that you probably guys did not think about because you don't have that point of reference. Maybe Jeremy does, but
doesn't count.
it's something that I thought about a lot. Is Americans, that probably describes a little bit the American brand of testosterone. In America, you guys in this country have the biggest houses. Really, there's no other place in the world that has so much personal space. And also, we are car-oriented society, which is also very unique and very typical for the United States. This gives the average American an unprecedented level of isolation. We live more separated from each other than any other country in the world. You go to Europe, Louis has been, and he knows everybody's kind of together,
Can't help it.
Yeah, you go
When they
to
drive these
Japan
these
or
small cars. My wife's car parked outside at the moment. We call it a van.
Yeah.
No one notices it. In England, that's
Yeah.
a seriously
That's
large vehicle.
giant car, and we are more in proximity to each other in the rest of the world. You go in Japan, you go to Europe, you go to Africa, wherever you go, people are closer together. They understand each other better. I think we are here. We have a little bit more isolation here, and the other countries are more pedestrian-oriented societies. We are
Kathleen
always
used to
alone,
say when we lived in England,
alone.
she always used to go on and on and on. And on and on
All right,
and
all right.
on
Quit going on.
and on
The-
and on
Somebody
about
turn off his
how
microphone.
small the parking. We go
Yeah.
to a supermarket,
Yeah.
right? We pull into the supermarket in
They
our
give you a
Volvo.
parking space that's 6 inches
and
narrower than your car.
But that's addition by subtraction, Kat, because you gain something when you lose space.
Scratches.
Well, that's true. But you learn to communicate with people. You learn empathy.
Oh, yeah,
You
yeah,
learn to be
yeah.
closer to people.
A
You
little
learn
more
the,
respect for
the
people's
language
space. Yeah.
and so I think we are a little bit more egotistical in a very, very tiny reason because of this as well.
But can I go back to... I really think there is something about bullying that relates to people who are just plain stupid. I mean, when you think of the bullies in school, they're dumb. Their followers, they're dumb.
Mostly jocks.
Right?
I would almost 100% disagree that they're dumb. Bullies, by definition, are not dumb. Most of the time, bullies, especially the really dangerous bullies, are the ones that are smart
but
and bored.
when you get to society, yeah.
No, I'm talking about in school. I'm talking about your schoolyard bully. You've got essentially 3 different types of schoolyard bullies. You've got kids that are picked on at home and have developed this toughness that they then carry over into school. You've got the kids that are out of place in school. Out of place is probably the wrong word, but dumb. The kids that are not catching on and feel
You
a lot
are
of
destroying
anger.
my entire thesis
I'm
here.
sorry, but I really feel like the really dangerous kids, the ones that you really have to worry about.
I'll
are
give
the
you
ones
that.
As
The
well
bullies-
as the most dangerous.
the bullies are not
the
necessarily
most
the
dangerous
stupid
leaders
ones.
are usually the ones that are wiliest.
But the people who allow bullies to take control, I think the dumber they are, the more they admire these people.
That I would
And as
wholeheartedly.
Kinda
our
like Conroy.
education
Yeah.
very
has
like Conroy,
gone down,
actually. You're quite right. He
bullies
just
have
doesn't
got more
care.
power.
He doesn't care. He doesn't wash his
Yeah.
hands. It's
Yeah.
oh dear,
But you're quite right. I think until bullies get whacked on the nose,
Or wherever.
or wherever, they aren't going to change. And whilst I think America is a very cool country, and we were talking to a close friend of ours last night who'd been to Abu Dhabi, and she says, working there, and she was there where they really wanted her to go to do a job. She goes and does the job. She flies back here, and she says, once she said, you don't realise until you've been somewhere like that, and they were one of the more forward-thinking Arab countries, how lucky you are to live here in America.
No doubt. Yeah.
You know, and so I think we're coming rapidly to the end of Wednesday Night Undressed at Conroy's. Next time, we're going to be talking about gun control. And the question we're going to be asking is, too many people get killed, but at the same time, it's an American's right to own a gun. So how do you deal with that? Don't say to me, don't be coming here next week and saying, oh, well, we've got to give away the guns, because it's their right to own a gun. What I put to the panel is, think about how we might do something about it. If you were president, what would you do? And another issue is, Americans still don't get security on flights and stuff like that. There's stuff in the media today about kids being patted down. They don't get it. Passport, no flight. No passport, no flight. You've been listening to Wednesday Night Undressed. You can hear the drinks being poured as we go. It's Wednesday Night Undressed. Thanks to the team.